Good afternoon, everyone, on this wet and snowy, sleety day in Edinburgh, but hope you're all nice and cosy in your own homes, being able to participate in this really important session this afternoon on implementation of digital telecare. So I'm going to hand over in a minute to David Brown, who's the Business Relationship Manager with the Digital Office for Scottish Local Government. And the Digital Telecare programme has been a key programme of work for us at a national level as part of technology-enabled care. And there's been really good progress made, but David and colleagues will be setting out where we're at in Scotland and what we still need to do. There was a really useful session on Tuesday, which involved a twinning with Spain and with Norway. So Scotland is in a twinning partnership with Spain and Norway, and looking at some of the shared learning and developing that sort of roadmap for digital telecare, working with some of our European partners. Today also sees the launch of a national briefing document by the Digital Office, focusing on the imperatives of the move from analogue to digital for almost 180,000 current telecare users in Scotland. So I'm sure you'll enjoy the presentations and take part, hopefully, in discussions. So I'm going to hand you over to David Brown.
Thanks, Margaret, and thanks everyone for joining. Delighted to be here and participate in this session. So as Margaret says, I'm going to take you through a little bit of background around the programme, give you a bit of an update on where we are and what our plans are going to be for next year, and also introduce you to some speakers who've been working away on lots of the kind of key activity and challenges which are part of digital telecare transition. Just a little bit of housekeeping for the session. Just please, can you all be courteous to other attendees and speakers? Write any questions that you have on the session or during the session in the chat box, and ensure that you select the session chat box to do that. And if you want to follow up on any of the content or have any questions, please get in touch with us using the email address on the screen. We'd absolutely love to have a conversation with you if you want to discuss any of these things further. And finally, just to remind you that the session has been recorded, so if you don't want to be captured on screen, please just don't enable your camera at any point. Okay, so the agenda for today, as I said, I'm going to kind of open it up and I'm going to talk you through the programme, give you an update on where we are. I'm going to then hand over to Ian Whitelaw, who's our Digital Telecare Project Manager for Falkirk Council. He's going to talk you through Falkirk Council's journey so far. Then we'll hand over to Stephen Rankine, who's the Head of Contact Centre Operations for Bield Housing, and he'll give you an update on where Bield are in terms of their transition. And last but not least, we've got Glenda, who works for the Health Social Care Partnership in Angus, and Glenda's going to update you on where they've got to. We'll follow up those sessions with a Q&A after that. Okay, next slide. So just a little bit of background then. So the strategic background to the programme. So most of the main telephony providers in the UK announced back in 2017 now that they would be decommissioning, switching off their analogue telephony network. That's the network that's been around in the UK for decades, and all of the kind of copper line infrastructure that sits underground, and they would be replacing that with a digital all IP solution. The Scottish Government's tech programme at that time responded by setting a strategic direction to support services through that switchover 2025 and to address the challenge through digital improvement, integration and innovation. Next slide, please. Thank you. So at that time, the Digital Office were commissioned with going away and working through and building a programme to work through that range of activity. A portfolio of programmes was created to address the strategic direction. The team provide expertise to support transformational shift towards digital telecare, and they do that through things like thought leadership, experience and discussion around operational telecare management and how those changes can be implemented and how digital telecare can be operationalised. A key component to this programme is digital security, and this is a real shift from what's traditionally been a real kind of lockdown analogue system with very little risk around cybersecurity or loss of data. And it's a portfolio programme and project management approach that's taken. Next slide, please. So, yeah, just in terms of some of the drivers for change, so I've mentioned then that we had the announcement back in 2017 all of the main providers in the UK would be transitioning over to a digital solution. I've left the 2025 date in there, but I really want to kind of stress today that we heard over the last 12 months, we've heard from a couple of the main providers, so Virgin being the biggest supplier, that they have accelerated their timescales, so they're now working to a deadline of 2023. That's had quite a significant impact on the programme and on the timescales, obviously, that services have to transition. And I really want to kind of stress as well that these dates are an end point to these programmes of work. So work is underway right now. Work is happening right now in the core of the network. The digital telecare team are increasingly hearing reports from telecare service providers where they have experienced significant disruption around things like spikes in failed calls. And some services have had real challenges kind of working through and identifying the reason for that. And it's mainly been what's going on in the core of the network. So this digital transition that telephony providers are working through, that carries quite a lot of risk, obviously, for service users and for service providers. So really keen to kind of stress the urgency and the importance. And Margaret touched on the national briefing document, so please try and access that document. Either contact ourselves or you can find that on social media at the moment. And that gives you lots of kind of key information around why you need to transition, what the challenges are around transitioning, and actually what the benefits are to transitioning as well. So please have a look at that if you have time. So telecare service providers really need to urgently start planning their implementation of digital telecare as soon as possible, and that's first and foremost so you can carry on delivering these critical services. And when you do transition over, the transition supports providers to address challenges whilst also creating opportunities to rethink service delivery, redesign services, and really unlock lots of kind of innovation opportunities around digital transformation. Next slide, please. So in terms of the evolution of digital telecare, the main reasons for implementing digital telecare fall into three broad categories. First and foremost, we want to make sure you can keep the lights on, keep your service going. It's also about adapting to increasing demand and complexity. And I've touched on this again, but one of the kind of key themes for our programme is around developing and improving what services deliver at the moment. Telecare services in Scotland do a great job, and they have done for a long time. Most people who are operationally involved would accept that it's a pretty reactive service at the moment. And fundamentally, the technology hasn't changed for nearly 20 years. This programme, this change for me gives us a kind of once in a lifetime opportunity to really rethink what we do and modernise and improve and shift from a really reactive model to a proactive model. So some of the benefits around the transition are a much greater degree of flexibility in terms of how alarm calls are routed and shared, much greater resilience, reliability, and integration with other digital devices. We're speaking about this a lot in telecare at the moment, where the technology, I've mentioned this, but the technology hasn't really changed fundamentally for a long time. And actually what people really want to see now is the ability to link their own devices with services, to use things like wearables, consumer devices. So digital unlocks lots of opportunities around that. Next slide, please. So just in terms of where the programme is so far, so the programme's been active since around 2017, 2018. We've been working through that time with a small group of early adopters who have all done fantastically well. You're going to hear from them today, some of them today. They've all done fantastically well working through lots of the kind of key milestones and activity which are part of this transition. All of the learning that this group has returned to the programme has been really, really powerful. And it's allowed us to build our digital telecare playbook. So our digital telecare playbook is an online repository which captures all of the key learning and resources services need to transition from analogue to digital. Next slide, please. So our playbook contains lots of guidance and advice. It has supporting templates, and these can all be accessed via bespoke pathways. The kind of key focus for us when we built this resource was genuinely about saving time, reducing duplication, and streamlining people's journeys. And I say that as someone who was the lead officer in Edinburgh for digital telecare for a couple of years before I moved into this role. And actually, we're really kind of focused on, first and foremost, making sure that we get services over the line in time before these networks start to really crumble. but also really kind of, taking a once for Scotland approach and making sure that we can learn from something once and then share that learning right across our network. So the information in the playbook is supported by resources with experiential knowledge, expertise, the guidance support, and also international research. And Margaret touched on our twinning project at the moment, where we are linked in with another couple of regions in Europe who are also transitioning towards digital. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just a little bit about how the books. So we have a series of pathways which are broken down across 3 phases: discovery, planning, and implementation. We launched the playbook in October 2019, and that was launched with our management pathway, which breaks down the transition into key stepping stones and milestones. We followed that up with our technical and security pathway, which is a focus on the kind of technical and security, cybersecurity components to this change. Our procurement pathway was launched in May this year, and our stakeholder engagement pathway was launched last month. Next slide, please. So since its launch in October 2019, 324 users have registered to access the repository. That's fantastic from our perspective. All 32 local authorities in Scotland are registered, which is great. And the top 5 downloads gives you a kind of flavour of what priorities are for people and services. So supplier security, a questionnaire, outline business case, summary of alarm and peripheral compatibility, mobile connectivity, FAQs, and data protection impact assessment. So I talked quite a lot about the benefits the playbook has had, and the feedback we've had back on the playbook has been really powerful, and it's really great to hear because it's doing exactly what we wanted to do. I spoke to a service provider this week who had downloaded the DPIA information from the playbook and had taken the downloads along to her information governance team to see what else needed to be done to get that piece of work over the line. She was told by that team that it was good to go and everything was there that they needed. So that's great for us to hear that saves people time and effort. I can say when I was leading this piece of work in Edinburgh, it literally took me 12 months and probably version 25 to get that piece of work concluded. So that's really good to hear that we've kind of streamlined that and saved people that time and effort. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just next steps for the programme. So we'll continue to develop the playbook, and that'll be based on lots of the learning and kind of co-design that comes back from services that are transitioning at the moment. We are working at the moment on our workforce pathway. Colin McFadyen, who's going to present later on today, is leading that piece of work. And early next year, we'll start to mobilise our innovation pathway, and that'll focus on some of the elements I've touched on today around kind of unlocking the benefits and leveraging the benefits of a digital platform. The implementation group, we are about to kind of really scale up for the programme. It's a really exciting time for us. So we're moving from having a kind of small group of early adopters to onboarding an additional 18 funded providers. Housing are now in scope for the programme, which is also excellent because it really broadens out not just the providers involved, but also the suppliers involved in the conversation, which is really important. We'll continue to kind of co-design content and share that with our network and build communities. And we always take an iterative approach. So all of the information in the playbook, for example, is continually being kind of updated and kept current and live. And so in terms of kind of how we engage, we'll continue to kind of build and co-design and collaborate. Okay, folks, that's myself. I'm going to hand you over now to Ian Whitelaw from Falkirk Council, and he'll talk you through their analog to digital journey.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to not so sunny Falkirk. Thank you, David. I've been asked to talk about Falkirk's digital telecare journey so far. I was mentioning earlier my new grey as a result, but there you go. So thank you. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so the key drivers for Falkirk really were about the increasing call failures that we were detecting across our analogue telecare network, where we were aware that people were pressing their buttons and the alarm calls weren't getting through as quickly as we'd like. And that for Falkirk is a risk, quite a big risk, I'm sure, not just for Falkirk, but others as well. And we realised, that the analogue telephony network was becoming increasingly unreliable, and David's already alluded to quite a bit of that. But we also seen some positives about moving to digital, and one of those being the ability to use cloud services in the future, in particular for perhaps business continuity to start with, and maybe eventually as we move forward and become a bit more mature with digital telecare, we can make that our business as usual. And finally, one of the key areas for us were certainly in relation to the fact that we could use potentially IoT or bring your own device, which is a next step, and I'll come on to that later in the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so our journey has been supported by a number of different people, including the local government digital office. The playbook in particular has been very supportive in terms of, well, for Falkirk, the DPIA template in particular was useful because it was well thought out and thorough rather than Falkirk having to do everything on their own. There were certainly a lot of benefits from that and sped up the process for Falkirk. We've also, or my colleagues in our Telecare service who manage the devices have also been, or in the past, employed an organisation known as Haven Enterprises. That organisation was contracted by us to pre-program all our digital alarms to go into the people of Falkirk's homes, all 4,000 of them nearly. And that meant for us that we could have a nearly plug-and-play service. So really what it means is rather than having to go along and plug in an alarm into a home phone line, find power, make sure there's, you know, there's a good signal and people can hear us from pressing the pendant from the bedroom to the living room, that we literally just went along once it was pre-programmed, plugged it in, checked there was a signal and put through a test call. And that sped up the deployment process for Falkirk in order to make sure that we could get as many alarms out there as possible. Our partners also in our corporate and housing services, particular ICT teams, and I think there's always a fear or a bit of negativity around internal and ICT services. However, in Falkirk, our experience is the opposite of that, to the point that they are, you know, driving us forward as opposed to us pulling them alongside us. Partners also included Chubb Systems, that is our ARC provider, our Alarm Receiving Centre database. We have been long-standing customers of Chubb Systems for quite a number of years, using their Analogue database. And just over a year ago, we asked them to upgrade it from analog to digital and provide us a solution. And I will admit, working with Chubb Systems closely over the last 12 months, they have been very flexible with us in terms of making changes and even rewriting some of the database to suit our needs going forward. And I suppose because we are a bit on the revolutionary cusp of things, they are more flexible than I would normally have experienced when you'd buy a system off the shelf. Also, because we chose to stick with our existing provider, then it made our procurement journey a bit easier. So we didn't have to go out to a big, huge invitation to tender and write out a scope and technical specification. We asked for a simple upgrade. The suppliers of the alarms that are installed in people's homes for Falkirk is predominantly Doro, and the reason we chose primarily one supplier was because we didn't want to manage different device management platforms. So each potential digital device comes with its own cloud service where we can program alarms. And of course, if you're having 2 or 3 or 4 perhaps different alarm types, then it means that you would have to learn 3 or 4 different device management platforms, and managing that in terms of staff training and technical knowledge was proving to be quite difficult. Not to mention, of course, that Doro alarms in Falkirk, and I can only speak for Falkirk, were heads and shoulders above in terms of quality for signalling or connectivity. You know, one of the first things we did was literally run about Falkirk with an alarm and see if there was any black spots, ensure these alarms could connect to the device management platform and initially in Analogue. So a bit like your HD ready TVs back in the day, the Doro alarms that we procured were digital ready, so we were using them in Analogue mode with the ability to transfer them over to digital when we're ready. And finally, CSL Dualcom, they are the connectivity provider for Doro, and have provided us with a very secure network in order to transmit signalling from the service user's home in through our corporate network and eventually land in our alarm receiving centre database. Challenges, well, no, it hasn't gone without challenges to get where we are. So cost being the first one, it is an expensive investment, but a necessary one. You know, failed calls, you know, need to be taken very seriously. And as a result, you know, we wrote a very robust business case, managed to get senior management buy-in and some capital funding, not to mention some support again from the local government digital office. There has and is still, even today, I believe, quite a bit of lack of knowledge and awareness about this. We had, for example, one of our registered social landlords on the phone the other day asking about why we're changing to digital and what that means for them. That's a concern. So, you know, people need to know that the telephony networks are being changed, and I think the more we talk about it, the better. The technical infrastructure for Falkirk wasn't in place to start with, so we've had to develop that and learned a lot and made a lot of mistakes as well. The call line identification at the time when it was an issue was a showstopper for Falkirk, to the point of myself and my colleague Pauline were dismayed by the journey we were going through. However, we did overcome that. I won't go into the details because I'm worried about the time, but that, along with heartbeat failures, as these devices have an always-on connection, or the alarms have an always-on connection to the device management platform, we have now got the ability to know when an alarm's not working. That wasn't previously possible in the analogue world. If the BT line was down, then someone pressed the button, they wouldn't know, or the call wouldn't go. With these alarms, with the digital alarms, we do now have the ability to know when they're not functioning, even if the button's not been pressed, which means they're much safer. With heartbeat though, or heartbeat failures, come the need to develop new processes, and because it's new, myself and my colleagues did have to come up with these processes and hope for the best. I'll be honest though, it wasn't as scary as we thought. And the last challenge for us was about the market maturity. I'm sure other partnerships would agree that, you know, to start with, the digital telecare market wasn't mature enough to support our needs initially. Hence the reason we've not went cloud to start with, but are aiming to get there. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. I think it was cut off there. Current situation in Falkirk, so we are upgraded. Our digital arc is now in place. We have circa 4,000 digital ready alarms installed. Today, right now, we are in final testing. We have just over 20, nearly 30 in-house users, staff, colleagues, friends, pressing buttons 24 hours a day and testing our database. And people laugh when I say this, but we're trying to kill it. We want to find the issues now before we do anything in terms of live migration. And we are at the point where we are seriously considering to begin migration. But that will be dependent on any issues. We haven't had any yet. There has been a couple of small things, but it's all positive in terms of change. And training, you know, recently, I think it was just last week, we found another training gap because of the systems are different. Even though it was a simple upgrade, and for the staff, generally the systems are the same, and we are finding new functionality that's causing a little bit of confusion. So we're learning as we go along. And next steps, so we're looking to upgrade our ward and call systems and transition those to digital. I think we've got about 4, maybe, I think 4, yes. We're also looking at our enhanced telecare services. So at the moment, we've done our basic mainstream button and box is what Falkirk's service offering is. But we are looking at the, you know, the smoke alarms, the heat detectors, the door contacts, the bed sensors, all of those things, the peripheral devices. I am, and certainly Falkirk are now, very, very keen on bring your own device. And we've been, the word is playing with at this time, things like mobile phones and Alexa. So we have got a working service from Alexa where we shout, Alexa, call Falkirk MEX or emergency, and it calls through to our ARC. It is in test, it's brand new, and you know it's not robust at this point, but the fact is we have it working. And finally, thanks to our ICT people, they are pushing us towards a cloud solution now rather than later. And that, again, is for me, is a massive bonus. And we do have a little bit of experience in Falkirk with cloud telephony solutions. We recognise how valuable they are in terms of business continuity and resilience. And we believe cloud solutions are the next natural step for Falkirk. And I'm not sure if that's me, but if there is another slide, I'll talk to it. Nope, me done. Right, thank you all. I'll hand over.
Thanks, Ian. That was fantastic. A reminder that if you want to ask questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to the Q&A at the end of the session and work through those. I'm now going to hand you over to Stephen Rankine, who's the head of contact centre operations for Bield Housing and Care.
Hi there. Are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Loud and clear. Good, good. Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name's Stephen Rankine. I'm head of contact centre operations for Bield Housing and Care, and I was very pleased to be asked along to talk about our journey to digital, and very thankful for it, for the opportunity. The subject matter is something that I could talk about for ages, but I'm very conscious of that it's Friday afternoon, so I'll try and keep it as short and sweet as possible. Could you put me on to the next slide, thanks? So I think the headline of this short presentation is that BR24 are digitally ready. They are receiving digital calls in both test and live environment. So to go through, what I wanted to do was give you a brief history of BR24, very brief, explain what we have done to begin the journey, what is motivating us to and what we're doing with the digital technology just now, and how we see it developing further in the future. Next slide. So BR24 are a department of Bield Housing and Care, and they were set up back in 1988 as an out-of-hours service to Bield's own tenant group. Utilised a small area in Bield's Castlebank Gardens Court in Annie's Land, where it stayed until 2019. It offered a range, a minimum range of services at the time, but that's grown and developed over time to the point where we have achieved, the services have achieved TSA accreditation since, and we've retained it since 2008. Our successes were demonstrated to many organisations, and we managed to get on board with a few other housing associations and councils who wanted to opt to use our services. Out with Bield's portfolio of just over 5,000 connected properties, we have in the region of 40,000 other people linked to the ARC in some shape or form. The operation was moved to Glasgow in the early part of 2019, and I'll come on to that in the future. We had also, just to follow on that, when we were at Annie's Land, we had a disaster recovery facility in our Glasgow head office as well. It was just a room up there. So, and I'll go on to the next slide, please. So the foundation, where did we have to start with? Well, we did relocate. We made the investment of moving our alarm receiving centre from Annie's Land into Bield's Glasgow head office. The real advantages in that were to bring it back under the wing of the Bield Housing Association and its management structure. The investment was made in conjunction with developing a customer contact centre. This was a sort of one point of contact for all customer inquiries. That would include repair reporting, allocation inquiries, just general inquiries. And BR24 sat really well within that design. We formed the ARC, and it was a state-of-the-art ARC at the time, and it was done to TSA recommendations. Our new hardware included things like SIP server upgrades, new soft phones connected directly to laptops. Each workstation had a laptop rather than a computer, and this just gave more secure and agile working capability. the investment was made in the Anniesland office, and this was a bit of a role reversal. So we had to duplicate everything that we did in the Glasgow office back in Anniesland, so that it gave us the exact same disaster recovery capability in the old office. It was all very time consuming and very costly, and I think that message is coming out. Next slide, please. The motivation, I think this is the most important part. What is the motivation before it? And I'm pretty sure with everybody listening, some part of this will resonate with everybody. So prior to the ARC upgrade, we did recognise that the industry was being left behind. The message was less coming from communication providers like Openreach, BT, and even the regulators like Ofcom was loud and clear that 2025 was going to happen. The switch off of their analogue technology was going to happen. And we know now that upgrade is actually underway as we speak. You know, we've had certain scenarios where, you know, odd things like the old analogue DTMF files, which are still very prevalent and we still use them every day. We're coming out of one exchange that had recently been upgraded twice as fast as they would normally. So there was a recognition issue there. So yeah, we know that this upgrade is happening as we speak, and they're trying to shove old technology through new technology, and it's not really working very well. So we knew we had to change, and that was the main driver to this. We also noticed, and this is maybe more Bield specific, we also noticed that there was a lot of work going on with digital PAUs, you know, the dispersed alarms, the units that just sit in somebody's house. Now, Bield have over 200 group living developments where most of them will have a group living ward and call arrangement. And this causes a bit of concern because we didn't see any development in this market. So we had to fill that gap. For the purposes of Bield Housing and Care, we had to fill that gap. So to do that, we with the help of the digital office and direction from them, we went to explore digital technology with group living devices. And we had some success in developing with a leading manufacturer developing and testing a converter box, which is call it, if you will, a Freeview set-top box. And all it does is it plugs into our existing analogue ward and call system, and any signal that needs to come out of that ward and call system is delivered to the ARC in a digital, I think it's now IP format, which does a number of things for us. One, it gets us digitally communicating, which is the goal. Two, it lets us relax our replacement program slightly. So we know that the technology in this front is looking as if it could be the PAUs with a device management portal, and that may be the direction of travel in the future. But we have perfectly good ward and call units out there that are that maybe only a couple of years old, and in a general life cycle, it's a number of years before they were due for replacement, well after 2025. So this box has bought us a bit of time. So the motivation for the ARC was we needed an ARC suitable to receive the testing and the signals coming from these boxes. So that was the main one. And lastly, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, but we were hit hard by a communications outage in 2019. It was a very random one. It was we've reported it, we've presented our findings to many people, including the TSA, about this, because it was very random. It was only in the west of Scotland. The rest of it, the ARC was operating very well everywhere else. It was only in the west of Scotland. It was random sites and it was random PAUs. It was and we never ever really did get to the bottom of it. None of the providers, none of the infrastructure providers were willing to take ownership of the defect, and it took 56 hours for them to resolve it, and we still don't know what they did at the time. So it was a dark place at the time. But what it did was, what the lesson that we did learn from that was, what everybody was telling us is move to digital. The only solution for all of this is to move to digital. So it accelerated Bield's desire to be the first fully digitally communicating housing association in Scotland. And I think we're well on track to achieve that. Next slide, please. So what are we doing with it just now? Well, as you probably know, COVID, as you all have heard so many people say, has brought many changes and challenges, and that we're not immune to that by any stretch of the imagination. We did have the luxury of moving into the Glasgow office at the time that gave us a space to embed safe working practices within the office. Excuse me, within the office. So that was good. We were able to give essential worker status. We offered social distancing within the arc itself. We had other areas in the business that in the building that could be utilised, and cleaning regimes and stuff like that. So we're fairly comfortable that we could work from the office. However, it didn't sit very well with us at the time. Staff well-being, we saw anxiety growing, we saw self-isolation growing, and therefore we had to react to that. So one Friday evening, we set our IT boys with the challenge of designing a remote working capability for our staff. And within 2 weeks, we had 100% of our staff working remotely, working from home. And this was achieved through the upgrade. It was made an awful lot easier through the upgrade that we had done. The SIP servers were able to be controlled through encrypted Citrix and iGel connections, and we could work from home. We were working from home within 2 weeks of our request, and it was really quite a remarkable feat at the time. And we have presented that as well to the digital office in terms of how we managed to achieve that, and see if anybody else could take advantage of it at the time. So the advantages of home working are just brilliant. We're now taking those advantages, and we're collecting the information. We're getting staff feedback, surveys, and the like. And really, what this is doing is giving us information to make proper decisions about how we're going to take this forward in the future. We're also really excited, and I've not mentioned it in the slide, that we're developing Telecare models in conjunction with a DHI for proactive outbound calling. So we're designing these just now. Very, very exciting times. And to simplify what this is we want to push out outbound calls to find out how people are, and hopefully reducing the reliance on the reactive model. Stop things early before they become, in its basic form, before they become the next A&E admission. And we're really excited about this. We are using the Bield Now IPs connector boxes live. We have developments that are communicating live with us as we speak. And we are now rolling out these within the next 2 to 3 months to almost 50% of all our developments. So that'll be quite a chunk of Bield's estate that will be communicating with our ARC in a digital fashion. We're also working in conjunction with 2 other major partners in testing and using digital PAUs. Now, there's no doubting that this may be the direction of travel that we should all look at, because the advantages that it brings, along with the device management portals, the advantages are just absolutely brilliant. But these are working through a sort of SCAPE. They're sending SCAPE protocol through digital connections and have GSM back up, so they have no reliance on the old analog structure at all. So we're really pushing on that, and that's another tested change we're doing with the digital office with David and his teams, and we're monitoring that really closely, trying to find out what the user experience is in that as well, is one of our important things. Okay, so next slide. So going forward, well, we need to take advantage of the abilities that we have with remote working and our digital upgrade. We don't know how that's going to look. That could be like 50-50 shifts, some in the office, some not, or it could be flexibility around things like peak times and low call call times as well. So we're just looking at that just now, and we're certainly designing a bit of a strategy around that going forward. But the headline for that is people's well-being, and that'll be forefront of that strategy. If you take this morning, for example, we had. I woke up certainly and I had 6 inches of snow outside and I had no travel concerns. So these sort of advantages are really sitting well with the staff and with us in terms of being able to offer a service for our clients. We're going to draw up and develop and grow the proactive calling models. And again, it's early doors for that, but it's really exciting times for us. And I think what we need to do, because we have so many external clients, we have something in the region of 53 external clients, we're really looking to push for everybody to move to digital quickly. We are looking down the barrel of this 2025 gun, and we are really, it's pushing on quicker than we anticipated with BT and OpenReach already upgrading their infrastructure. We, as an organisation, as BR24, receive over 1 million inbound calls per year, and only a handful of them are digital at the moment, and we need to press on with that. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're looking to develop an ARC that's capable of receiving signals from any alarm manufacturer. So we don't want a customer to come to us and say, well, I bought Doro and you can't use it. So we are working with manufacturers just now to operate a sort of test bed environment for as many manufacturers that are willing to join in that research, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of sit down with clients and be able to show them an end-to-end product, press a button here, and somebody answers at the other end. So we're hoping to do that very soon. And that just, again, we will want to assist existing and new clients to move away from analog by giving them information that allows them to make informed decisions about where they go. There's no doubting that an awful lot of people at the moment have reached a bit of a crossroads in this and are wondering where to turn. And if we can facilitate that in some way, then we're happy to do that, because the next point there is to allow organisations to invest in alarm sending technology, and I mean that quite sincerely, and it's possibly one of the most controversial points is that people don't know where to invest. They've come to a bit of a crossroads of T-junction. Where do they invest in the ARC first? Do they invest in technology? But our time is running out, so. We're saying to a lot of people, well, don't worry about the ARC. The ARCs are there. The ARCs are receiving. You need to make and focus your investment in the digital sending technology. You need to replace your old analog PAUs or warden calls with something new. And that's where I think people need to kind of focus their direction of investment in going forward. And then there is what brings this new device management portal, which is a particularly good tool for the clients, for people, but it's who owns the information that comes into that, and that needs to be kind of clarified, and it needs to be less. There's a lot of nerves about it because there's a lot of information comes into that portal, an awful lot more information than we ever had before on an analog basis. So who looks after it? Who monitors it? And we wanted to enter into that service as well. We will need to do it for Bield Housing and Care, and we will also be able to offer it to our external clients. So that's really how we want to accelerate everybody's move to digital. Further investigation of a cloud-based ARC solution. I heard Ian speaking about that earlier, and if I'm quite perfectly honestly with you, I've got no idea what that means, but I'm told by my IT boys that that's the way forward, and so we're looking into that. We've got to promote our other digital services, and we have lone worker monitoring going on just now, and we see that as being quite a vital thing for lone working and remote working. So we want to develop that slightly for people working from home to have that sort of panic button, that easy access to management, all that, you know, while they're maybe on a call and using the database. So we're working on that as well. We've also got SureCall that we want to be able to do and roll out further as well. And lastly, and I think this is quite important, there's digitization in this whole process is I've not mentioned it, and I've done that quite deliberately, because I think further investigation, development and testing of smart and wearable devices, a bit like the Alexa thing and stuff, that's digitization. But really where we are just now is we are really pushing for that analog to digital. Let's move away from analog. So digitization is something that will come in time. That lifestyle monitoring is going to be very exciting and is going to be the future. But it's a bit of a futile thing if you don't have a digital connection to an alarm receiving center or a portal. So yeah, we're excited about the future as well. And that really is just a sort of brief overview of our journey to digital and where we wanted to go from there. And I hope that helps you along the way, and happy to answer any questions in the future.
Thank you, Stephen. That was fantastic. Really good update. Okay, folks, I'm now going to Development Officer with Angus Health Social Care Partnership.
Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. Thanks for hanging on. We're still here. I'd like to introduce you to where we are in Angus. Well, I'm about a year behind where Falkirk is. I've really just been starting at this. It feels like forever, but it's only a year. I'm trying to be positive, and I will be, I promise you. If you could just move the slide along, please. Right. Angus, for those of you who probably will all know where it is, it consists of a mixture of rural and urban areas, and we have many problems in the rural areas with connectivity and signal strength. So I was a bit... when it came to approaching Analogue as well, I had quite a lot of trepidation about it because I knew it was going to be quite a big problem for us in Angus, and that was one of my motivating factors, because I knew we had to get in soon and start working on the connectivity with our IDT department, make sure that we could cover the whole of Angus. So what have I done so far? If I could just actually move the slide along, please. So in Angus, I started back in about a year and a half ago by writing up a situation report, background and action and recommendations, and combining that with a business case plan. I was fortunate enough to secure senior management support and funding at that time, and I would say that's one of your key ones. Get that in place first, and everything else seems to go a lot smoother. I then sent out, at the time, it clashed with our current contract for our ARC running out, so we had to go through the tendering process, putting an invitation out to tender, and that took a lot longer than I thought it would. Up about 8-9 months it took us to finally get through that process. So again, that was something that we had to work on quite a lot. While we were doing that, I created a working group with our IT and our suppliers, who are Chubb, the same as Falkirk. And I'm ever so glad that Ian's in front of me, so I'm learning a lot from him as well as everyone else. And we started pulling together what we needed for the first phase, as I saw, which was updating our control room. So I ended up writing a lot of governance, lots of DPIAs, equality impact assessments, benefit delivery plan. I could go on, but there's quite a lot of paperwork at the start of it. But the main ones are definitely the DPIAs, and as I'm finding out, risk assessments. They're keeping me quite busy at the moment. I carried out an on-site assessment with IT and our suppliers to look at our infrastructure and make sure we had everything in place to get the control upgrade going, and that's what we did quite a while ago. We placed our order when we finally got the tender approved, and we stated that tender worked out to be the existing contractor. So we stayed with them, we placed our order, and we agreed for our start date for the control upgrade, which was a couple of weeks ago on the 16th of November. And I'm happy to say that that has happened. Around the run up to it, we had regular meetings to discuss the technical aspects, ensuring compliance with local authorities, the IT security network regulations. And I was issuing updates to everybody, senior management down, on a regular fortnightly basis, so they knew what was going on and everybody was aware of the situation. And I would just like to point out that I did a lot of this before BP, as I say, before Playbook came out in November last year. And I was quite relieved once I'd looked at Playbook to find out that I had kind of followed the plan that they were working on. So that was really good for me to get reassurance that I was going on the right path, because it can be quite overwhelming if you're just starting out at the beginning of it all. So I would always say, look at that playbook, because it really was helpful. Can I ask the next slide, please? So where we are now, fortunately, the upgrade has happened in the control room. We've got it all digitally ready now. We did have a couple of problems, as to be expected when you're doing a major works. A couple of phone lines needed to be replaced, and our voice recorder decided to part company with us, so we had to get a new one. So that's delayed us finishing off the upgrade, but I'm looking to have that done by the end of this month. We've got a couple of alarms, and we're going to get a third one in. And I've learnt from Ian and Falkirk, having learnt about the training, it's not so much the basic alarm, it's the remote programming and getting staff used to using the different remote programming technologies that are out there. And it can be quite confusing. So I think on reflection, having tried out 2 of the different alarms at the moment, we will just stick with one alarm in the future, and we're hoping that will be the one that will be Chubb's one, which is coming out very shortly. We've got one to try, and that's the one we're going to go with, because it's also backwards compatible with our existing Telecare equipment. So that was a cost saving that we worked into our business plan at the beginning. So that's why we decided to go down that route. Once we've got the ARC upgraded, we'll move on to our next phase. And as I said earlier, the risk assessments I've completed, I'm having to revisit and recheck. Now that I understand the process a bit better, I will be the first to admit I'm not that technically minded. So for me, this has been a huge learning curve, and I would advise you always to have IT on board with you, so you've got that support to advise you and keep you right. Next slide, please. So our next steps will be starting to comprehensively test the system with our suppliers and make sure that it meets our required standard of our IT security. So that'll be very much the next step. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the training of the staff, and I think Ian touched on this as well. Although for us, the Chubb platform is very much the same as it was before, there are new add-ons to it, like the remote programming, which we will need to train our staff on. So we're working on a remote program, maybe a video, something like that, which will help us to show the staff what they have to do. We're also creating a working group to look at the migration for the alarm equipment, identifying who gets transferred first, how we're going to test it, that sort of thing. And that's in preparation for the penetration testing, which this will all take a long time, I'm aware, but we're only just at the very beginning of it. And I'm quite excited to get it going, but I suspect it won't be till January that we'll be in a place to start testing. But we'll wait and see, and we're fingers crossed on that one. So after that, we'll obviously start the planning for the internal and user acceptance testing, make sure our staff are happy with it and it works with service users. And obviously, as I said before, review the risk assessment regularly. We also have long-term distance plans in Angus once we get this upgrade sorted to look at digital connection with our CM2000 platform, which is where we allocate our workers their tasks, and also with our Care First, or it will be when we get it done, the Eclipse social care database, so we can populate observations straight from our staff's phones. But this is all stuff we're planning for the future. But my main consideration at the moment is working on getting the digital transition over and done with. Well, it'll never be over and done with, but to this point where we can, where Ian will be, where we can actually go live. Next slide, please. So I'd like to, being as I started this journey by myself and I picked up people along the way, I would like to say for those that are considering or looking at the start of this, remember you're not alone. You do have a support network out there that you just have to dip into it and use it. Make use of your playbook. I find it extremely helpful and very supportive. I would also make sure that you have access to somebody who has a technological mind. I don't necessarily have a technological mind. I've worked with Telecare a long time, but when you start going digital, there's a lot more to think about. And I struggle at times with that, so I always make sure you've got somebody with the technological mind to help you with that. Get sign up from your senior management as early as possible to support you with this, and use the support available and don't be afraid to ask. And I'd just like to say everybody good luck, because we're all going to have to go on the same journey very shortly. And that's it for me, thanks.
Great, thanks, Glenda. So my name's Colin McFadyen. I'm one of the project managers for Digital Telecare. And just if I can, a few minutes just to go through the questions that have come up. We haven't got a huge amount of time, so I'll answer a couple of them myself. But really, just wanted to highlight, obviously, we've just heard three fairly different approaches in dealing with the thorny issues of digital telecare. Probably the two front runners in BR24 and Falkirk, certainly as far as Scotland's concerned. But also, although both the partnerships actually end up using Chubb as a solution, just they're different approaches up until now as well. But, as far as the questions have gone, and if anyone does have any, it's the last opportunity to really put some in the session chat as well. The first one we had was how can we do more to raise awareness of analog to digital switchover and the impacts? And the digital telecare team within the local government digital office are working to raise this across the partnerships in Scotland, and indeed all of the telecare service providers, both health and social care partnerships and housing associations, and to be able to support them in that. And what we've been trying to do recently is to raise the issue of service user knowledge, and to encourage people to raise it with their service users, so that they are aware of the issue. And as digital migration happens throughout the community, people are more aware of the impacts that this could happen. I'll go back in a moment and ask David if he's got any other thoughts on that. But if I can jump to Ian, first of all, there's two questions specifically for Falkirk. First one, Ian, was how are you managing your DMP and how do staff feel about accessing it?
Okay, so our DMP is called iCare from Doro, and when we initially did our evaluation across different types of alarms, we found that the iCare platform was far superior in terms of its user friendliness, to the point that our staff, I believe, are now experts at it, better than me actually, because it's their bread and butter every single day. What I will note in comparison to other DMPs is when we remote program our alarms or make changes to alarms using the device management platform or DMP, the updates are pretty much real time. You know, you send the update and it happens nearly immediately, a few minutes really, in comparison to others, which I believe can sometimes run overnight. I'm certainly not plugging Doro or iCare. All I can tell you from Falkirk's perspective is our staff love the iCare platform, the DMP. And don't forget, this DMP has been a wee bit, dare I use the word revolutionary in Falkirk? every time an alarm broke down in the past, someone would have to jump in a van, drive out there and swap it out or try and fix it. Now, we plug in, we remote in, check the device, get a test call, and make any changes necessary. And as a last resort, then we would attend on site. And previously, again, we would have to manually program an analog alarm, but now we could simply swap it out and plug and play. So our fix is much quicker. I'm not saying that's not the same for other device management platforms. So I suppose to sum that question up, Falkirk's Telecare staff who are responsible for the deployment of these alarms have had a significant improvement in their efficiencies, and so far, and they've been using it a couple of years actually, are raving about the improvements it's made to their job and those things. I suppose the last thing about the DMP is just about the training. It is different. It's completely different to programming alarms manually, and it's fault finding and training and all those things is an absolute must. So I suppose my message to other partnerships is just about give yourselves time, give your staff time to become familiar with it, to get used to it, to find out the bits that work well and other bits that don't work so well. I suppose that's the best answer I can give.
Okay, thanks, Ian. And the other one for you, did you have a secret weapon that engaged ICT super actively that wasn't chocolate?
Chocolate always works. Snickers. I'm not going to say that ICT were always engaged in this. Way back when we started this journey, we had to not fight, actually fight. We had to fight our way to tell people about it, and I think my colleague and I, Colin, were even seen as scaremongers. That's never going to happen. They're never going to switch off those phone lines. However, ICT services in Falkirk certainly have, there's been a change. They've seen messages from local government digital office, they've seen information publicly about the switchover. So my colleague and I, Colin, have not been talking nonsense all that time and are worthy of listening to, I suppose. But to the point now that they are actually, they're not just bought in, they're engaged and taking it to a whole new level. Like Glenda, I'm going to admit my technical knowledge goes to a certain point. I know this service, I know Telecare, I've done it for a few years now, we've institutionalised maybe. But the next steps, cloud, is something that our ICT are driving for us. And that, for me, is music to my ears, because there is no way I could deliver cloud myself at this point. That needs another level of technical expertise. So yeah, they've engaged to the point that they are taking a bit more of a lead than ever before, which again is music to my ears. And chocolate helps.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Another question was any challenges around analog lines being cut off with no digital? There's a couple of aspects to this one. We haven't really come across that one, at least I haven't come across that one. What we have found is analog lines being cut off as digital's put in, and that causing issues. I haven't heard of digital replacement, but certainly we have had this other issue of people being migrated across without realizing it was going to happen, and that there being issues around that. Is there going to be an operational mix of analog to digital? There is a further question coming onto that one, which I'll pass to David. And yes, I think that as we'll come across, as people are migrating, there will be a point, certainly for most partnerships, where they will have to operate both of them, at least for a time anyway. And then lastly, are there any issues around the use of mobile signal and locations without signals? And again, Lorna from Murray has highlighted issues there as well. And we are aware that obviously there are black spots, both internet black spots and mobile black spots across Scotland. It's the nature of our terrain. I can say the playbook has a number of documents on this, including a guide to black spots, and working out how to deal with this is something we are trying to deal with as an office, and we're certainly open to help anyone we can take that issue forwards and to try and work out the elements of risk and how to mitigate those as they approach them. David, if I could ask you to come on though. I've got a couple of questions I'll punt your way.
Yeah.
And the first of those is if you've got anything else you wanted to raise about the awareness of.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think what I would say we've done really well so far as a programme is kind of engage Telecare leads, operational teams, Telecare managers, tech leads. And there's a really good understanding now, not just of the kind of need for change, but actually lots of appetite to change and unlock some of the innovation opportunities I mentioned earlier. Our primary focus now, and we hear consistently from operational teams that they need much more senior level sponsorship. So our primary focus now is kind of trying to engage that group. Margaret mentioned our national briefing document that was launched today, and that's a kind of targeted resource aimed at specifically at kind of chief exec, chief officer level to really give them all of the key information they need around the costs of transition, the risk about delaying your transition, and the opportunities around making this change as well. So that's a kind of primary focus for us over the next few months to try and make sure that operational teams get the sponsorship and support they need.
Cool. Thank you. The other one I was going to ask you to deal with was questions. How does migration advice mitigate the risk of analog signals?
Yes, good question as well. Our advice is not to use analog signalling over digital lines, and that's based on, and some of this is actually covered in our national briefing document. So there are lots of examples internationally where some international programs have tried to deploy analog signalling, and it's failed very badly. In some cases, there have been at least one fatality in some countries. So our position is that that's not safe and reliable, and that's backed up by services like organisations like Ofcom as well. And there's a lot of, we're gathering as much kind of research and evidence on that as we can. So we would just really encourage services to move towards digital as quickly as they could.
Great. And the last one I think we've got so far is from Anne-Marie, independent advocacy, and our citizens offered independent advocacy to participate and be listened to. I'm not aware of having heard of it, but
no, it's a good question as well. I think we'd like to do a bit more around citizen engagement. I mentioned earlier that we recently launched our stakeholder pathway in the playbook, and one of the key stakeholder groups for us would be citizens. So we're mobilising a range of activity at the moment to make sure that they are consulted and engaged in terms of what they would like to see around this change, make sure they have the information that they need as part of this change. And again, this is covered off in detail in our national briefing document, which responds to a range of questions that citizens might have as part of their journey. So yeah, we're really keen to kind of build on what's happened so far to make sure they're heard and included in it.
Great. Thank you. And thank you everyone for your questions. I haven't had any others coming in, and since we're now almost 10 minutes over the advertised time, I think we'll to end it there. So thank you very much for all of your attention and the good, kind comments you've put across. On the slide at the moment are our contact details, LinkedIn, our website, and our Twitter handle. If you've got any other questions outside of this, please feel free to drop us a message. We'll be very willing to answer anyone and to raise any issues we can. Thank you very much for your attention. Good afternoon.